In the heart of a small town on the outskirts of a bustling city lived an elderly farming couple, Don Arturo and Dona Clara. Despite the hardships life threw at them, they always managed to keep a smile on their faces and hope in their hearts. For many years, they worked tirelessly to maintain a small farm where they raised a few cows and chickens and built a cozy cabin they called home, a refuge filled with love and memories. Everything seemed to be going well until their only son, Daniel, married Raquel, a woman with a strong personality and clear ambitions. Don Arturo and Dona Clara, humble and devoted parents, adored their son and supported him unconditionally. When Daniel and Raquel needed a place to stay temporarily while they searched for their own home, the elderly couple didn't hesitate to offer their house. However, over time, Raquel's influence over Daniel grew stronger, and she eventually convinced him to expel his own parents from the house they had built with so much effort and sacrifice. Raquel desired the property and the few possessions the elderly couple had, solely for herself. Daniel approached his parents with what seemed like a harmless proposal: a trip to the city's Central Park to enjoy the afternoon together. Don Arturo and Dona Clara found the idea delightful, seeing it as an opportunity to spend time with family and reminisce about the good old days. However, they didn't notice the heavy suitcase Daniel had secretly packed, containing all their clothes and belongings. They got into Don Arturo's old car, and the ride to the park was filled with laughter and shared memories. But once they arrived, the atmosphere changed drastically. Daniel, avoiding eye contact, stopped the car, placed the suitcase on the ground, and revealed his true plan: to abandon them there and return home with Raquel, leaving his parents behind. Dona Clara, with tears in her eyes, pleaded with her son to reconsider, reminding him of all the happy moments they had shared and the unconditional love they had always given him. Don Arturo, with a heavy heart, took a deep breath and said, "Son, if you've truly decided to do this, I ask that you leave me here, but not your mother. She needs insulin to survive, and you can't condemn her to die here." Daniel's response was cold and cruel. He said, "I'm sorry, Father, but Raquel doesn't want you living with us. That's what she has decided. You have to understand. She's my wife, and you always told me that a man's duty is to make his wife happy." With a trembling voice, he got out of the car, took a taxi, and left, abandoning his parents. After many years of love and happiness in their beautiful home, Don Arturo and Dona Clara were suddenly and heartbreakingly evicted by their own son. The elderly couple, filled with deep sorrow, wondered what had happened to the loving, attentive son they had raised. Forced to live in Don Arturo's old car parked in the park, they were initially shocked by their new reality. But soon, they realized that there was something money couldn't buy: love and mutual support. Despite the difficult situation, the elderly couple found moments of happiness in their new life. Every day, they woke up early to watch the sunrise and listen to the birds singing in the park. They spent their days walking the paths, talking, and reminiscing about better times. One morning, Daniel was enjoying a refreshing glass of water as he relaxed on the porch of his house. But when he saw Raquel's figure in the distance, he realized his peace was about to be shattered. He got up slowly and went to help her with the shopping bags. As he approached, Raquel threw all the bags at him at once, forcing him to juggle them like a circus acrobat. The weight of the bags nearly knocked him over. "Daniel, you're so weak," Raquel said, as if she had handed him just a few light items, watching as he struggled not to fall and drop everything. Daniel, taken aback by his wife's hostile attitude, couldn't help but ask the million-dollar question, "But my love, what's wrong? What did I do?" Raquel, clearly irritated, snapped back, "I'm tired of having to walk all the way to the city whenever I need to do something and carrying all this weight by myself." Daniel, murmuring softly, said, "It seems someone forgot their daily dose of good humor." "What did you say?" Raquel demanded, nearly shouting in his face, causing Daniel to cover his ears as if his eardrums were in pain. "Nothing, my love, nothing. I'm just glad you're back," he replied in a flattering tone. "We need a car. Raquel said, her words striking Daniel like a thunderclap. But my love, where will we get one? We don't have money to buy a car, he replied, his voice filled with worry, fearing that his wife had come up with another of her brilliant ideas. Well, you could take your parents' car, she said, with a glint in her eye. With a look of intrigue in his eyes, Daniel hesitated, unsure if he had heard his wife correctly. Surely you can't mean that, he said, hoping he had misunderstood. Don't pretend to be deaf, Raquel snapped impatiently. Go and take your parents' car now, she demanded, her tone growing sharper at her husband's hesitation. But my love, they live in that car. If I take it, where will they stay? Daniel's voice trembled with a mixture of regret and desperation, hoping to appeal to her compassion. However, Raquel's expression remained cold and unmoved. And why should that matter to me? She retorted, her voice rising. I want a car, and you will get it for me, she screamed hysterically. With a heavy heart, Daniel made his way to the park where his parents were living. On the drive over, his mind raced, trying to find the right words to soften the blow. Dad, can I borrow your car? I'll bring it back soon, he rehearsed, then reconsidered. No, maybe I should just tell him I need it for a few days? His thoughts churned as he approached the familiar sight of his parents. Look, Arturo, it's our son, exclaimed Dona Clara, her eyes lighting up with joy at the unmistakable figure of Daniel approaching in the distance. I knew he'd come back for us, she said with a hopeful smile, her heart swelling with the belief that their son still had a good heart. Don Arturo, filled with equal optimism, began gathering their belongings, convinced they were finally going home. When Daniel reached them, the two elderly parents wrapped him in a warm, loving embrace. But instead of the joyful reunion they had hoped for, Daniel's greeting was brief and distant. Hello, Dad. Hello, Mom, he said coldly, stepping back from their embrace. The joy and hope that had filled their hearts quickly turned to confusion and hurt as they realized something was terribly wrong. Their disappointment deepened when Daniel finally revealed the true reason for his visit. The truth is, I'm only here to ask for the car, he said, his words striking like a thunderbolt in the ears of Don Arturo and Dona Clara. What? Please, son, have mercy on us. We'll be out in the open if you take the car, they pleaded, their voices trembling with desperation. Daniel couldn't meet their eyes, his head bowed in shame. I'm sorry, but Raquel ordered me to do this, and she'll be furious if I return without the car, he muttered, his voice barely audible. With that, he threw their suitcase on the ground, got into the car, and drove away, leaving his parents abandoned and exposed to the elements. A torrent of tears welled up in Dona Clara's eyes, which had once shone with pride and joy whenever she looked at her son. Now, those same eyes were filled with heartbreak and sorrow as she and Don Arturo faced an uncertain and bleak future. Months passed, and the situation in Daniel and Raquel's home began to deteriorate. The pantry was empty, and Daniel discovered several of the farm animals had died from neglect, having not been fed or cared for since his parents left. Daniel was repairing a fence when he suddenly heard Raquel's sharp, irritated voice calling him insistently. What does she want now? He wondered, knowing that every time Raquel called him in that tone, it meant trouble. Daniel, we're out of milk and eggs, she shouted in a reproachful tone when he approached. Some of the animals have died because they weren't fed properly, and since your parents left, no one has tended to the farm or the fields, so we have nothing to sell either. My love, I don't know what to do. We have animals, but no produce to sell, and we don't even have money to buy food, Daniel replied, his voice filled with concern. He closed his eyes, bracing for the storm of anger he knew was coming. Raquel, her face red with fury, screamed at him, Then find a job. It's your duty to support me and make sure I don't lack anything. Daniel, looking down at the ground, muttered under his breath. Raquel, hands on her hips, impatiently demanded, What did you just say? Daniel quickly responded, Nothing, my love, nothing. I'll go out tomorrow and look for a job, he said hurriedly, knowing how dangerous it was to contradict his wife. Every day, Daniel woke up early, dressed in his best suit, and went out in search of work. But day after day, he returned home empty-handed, frustrated, and full of doubts about the future. Let me guess, you didn't get a job today either, Raquel said sarcastically when she saw him return with a defeated look on his face. Her shrill voice startled Daniel, who had been lost in thought. Oh, darling, you scared me. No, I didn't find anything today either, he replied sadly. Of course you didn't, with that loser look on your face, she taunted, a mocking smile curling on her lips. Daniel murmured softly, almost to himself, What did you say? Raquel snapped, her eyes narrowing. One of these days, I'll knock your teeth out so you stop whining. Nothing, my love, nothing, Daniel replied quickly, his voice trembling. You're right, I do look like a loser. Daniel smiled timidly at Raquel, but her eyes narrowed with a look of disdain. You're useless, she spat, but I'll go with you and make sure you find a job. Her voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. That morning, Raquel and Daniel went from house to house, business to business, searching for work. However, all they received were negative responses and closed doors. Yet, Raquel was not one to give up easily. She insisted they continue the search, determined not to return home empty-handed. As the day wore on, Raquel suddenly stopped, letting out an exasperated sigh. Oh, my feet hurt so much from all this walking, she exclaimed, her complaints becoming more frequent as her energy waned. The fatigue was evident in her voice and posture. Daniel, who had been silently enduring her complaints, murmured under his breath, I'm glad you finally understand what I go through every day. What did you just say? Raquel snapped, her tone turning threatening. Nothing, my love, nothing at all, Daniel quickly responded, trying to appease her. Let's go to the park so you can sit down and rest your delicate little feet, he added in a flattering tone. Raquel, slightly appeased, nodded. Finally, you've had a good idea. Let's go, she said, pushing him forward to keep walking. As they passed through the park, Daniel instinctively looked around for his parents. To his great surprise, they were nowhere to be found. Where could they be? He wondered aloud, anxiety creeping into his voice. Raquel, catching his tone, mocked him. Who are your parents anyway? Just a couple of lazy bums. I know where you got your laziness from. She laughed derisively, but Daniel couldn't shake the growing concern that gnawed at him. He began asking people nearby if they had seen his parents, but no one had. Finally, someone informed him that they had left the park some time ago, though no one knew where they had gone. A lump formed in Daniel's throat as he imagined the fate of his poor parents. Where could they be? What hardships are they facing? He whispered, feeling a deep pang of guilt. Stop feeling sorry for yourself, Raquel interrupted, her voice cutting through his thoughts. We'd better head to the next town over. It's clear to me that we're not going to find anything in this city, she added, her tone tinged with disappointment. They walked a few more blocks until they arrived at a luxurious neighborhood. Raquel's eyes widened with delight as she took in the grandeur of the houses, the beauty of the landscape, and the sheer opulence surrounding her. She sighed dreamily and said, See this, Daniel? This is the life I deserve. But no, I married you, a poor fool. Yes, of course. No one else could put up with you, Daniel muttered under his breath, barely audible. What did you say? Raquel stopped and glared at him, her eyes flashing with anger. Nothing, my love, nothing at all. You're right, this is the life you deserve, Daniel replied quickly, forcing a smile. Just then, a particularly elegant mansion caught Raquel's eye. I can't believe my eyes. This mansion is the most beautiful of them all. Come on, Daniel, let's knock on the door. Maybe they'll give you a job. They approached the mansion and rang the doorbell. Within seconds, a refined, middle-aged woman, dressed impeccably, appeared before them. Good morning. How may I help you? She asked politely. Please, ma'am, Could you give my husband a job? We are very poor, and there are no jobs in our town. We were forced to come here in search of help, Raquel pleaded, her voice adopting a sweet, almost pitiful tone. The woman smiled kindly. Please wait here. I will ask the owner of the house. I won't be long, she said, before disappearing inside, leaving them waiting at the door. She's just a servant, but look at how elegantly she's dressed. Imagine how wealthy the owner must be, Raquel whispered, her mouth agape in awe. Meanwhile, Daniel seemed oblivious to everything around him, still lost in deep sorrow, tormented by thoughts of his parents. Where are they? What hardships could they be facing? He wondered, the knot in his stomach tightening. Eventually, Daniel pushed his worries aside, trying to focus on the present. He managed a weak smile and joked, maybe they won't give us the job. No one wants a crybaby as an employee, nor do they want a bossy witch. What did you just say? Raquel asked, her expression darkening with suspicion. Nothing, my love, nothing at all. You're right, Daniel said, flashing a sarcastic smile just as Raquel was about to scold him. At that moment, the door opened again, and the housekeeper reappeared. Please come in. The master and mistress of the house will see you now, she said. Thank goodness she came back, Daniel thought, sighing with relief at the housekeeper's timely arrival. He silently thanked her for diffusing the tense moment between him and Raquel. They were led into the mansion and invited to sit in a lavishly decorated room, where they were asked to wait. Raquel couldn't stop talking, admiring the luxury surrounding them. These people must be very rich, don't you think, Daniel? She asked, though her husband seemed distracted and barely responded. After what felt like an eternity to Raquel, the lady of the house finally arrived. This way, please, the housekeeper said, guiding them into a grand salon where the owner of the mansion was waiting. The woman was seated in an elegant armchair, her back turned to them. Raquel immediately began talking. How are you, ma'am? Thank you for receiving us. My name is Raquel, and this is my husband, Daniel. There was a moment of silence as the lady remained with her back to them, saying nothing. Undeterred, Raquel continued, We've come from the neighboring city. We couldn't find work there, so we had no choice but to come here, hoping to find someone compassionate enough to help us. May God have mercy on us. Still, the woman said nothing, and Raquel began to lose her patience. How rude. She hasn't even turned to look at us, Raquel thought bitterly, but she sighed and pressed on. My husband may be a bit clumsy, but I assure you he's honest and hardworking. If you give him a job here in your mansion, you won't regret it, Raquel insisted. Unexpectedly, the lady of the house broke her silence. The only flaw in your husband is that he's a weak-willed man who lets himself be influenced by an abusive wife, she said firmly. How dare you? Raquel gasped, unable to believe this stranger had spoken to her in such a manner. Who does she think she is, meddling in my life? She fumed silently. Did you hear what she just said? Raquel hissed at Daniel, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Say something to this meddlesome woman. Are you going to let her disrespect me like this? Daniel didn't know what to say, but suddenly, something about the woman struck him deeply. His heart skipped a beat as recognition dawned on him. Mother, is that you? The woman slowly turned toward him, revealing her face clearly for the first time. Mother? Daniel whispered, disbelief clouding his voice. Raquel was left speechless, her eyes wide with shock as she finally recognized the woman standing before her. The woman who had risen to meet her gaze was none other than her mother-in-law, Dona Clara. Raquel blinked rapidly, hoping her eyes were deceiving her, but there was no mistaking it. She and Daniel stood frozen, their minds reeling with the impossible realization. The elegant woman before them was indeed Daniel's mother. Dona Clara had changed significantly. Gone was the simple, disheveled woman they remembered. Now, she stood before them poised and refined, exuding an air of sophistication. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room, the tension palpable as Raquel and Daniel's eyes darted around, filled with doubt and questions. At that moment, a large door creaked open, and the master of the house entered. To their astonishment, it was Don Arturo. Though his elegant attire now gave him a different appearance, there was no doubt it was him. But how could this be? Raquel thought, her mind struggling to reconcile the polished man before her with the shabby old farmer she once knew. He seemed like an entirely different person. Raquel and Daniel remained silent, their minds awash with questions. How was it possible that Clara and Arturo were living in such an impressive mansion? Where did they get such fine clothing? An overwhelming silence filled the air as they grappled with these thoughts. Sensing their confusion, the two elders began to explain. They revealed that they had always been wealthy, but many years ago, they chose to live a quiet, austere life in the countryside because money had never been important to them. They had decided to raise their son without privileges or luxuries, hoping he would grow into a good man. However, when Daniel abandoned them and took their only means of refuge, the car, it was a deep disappointment. After he left, they decided to leave the small town behind and move to the big city. They withdrew money from their accounts and bought this mansion to avoid the hardships of the cold park where Daniel had left them. Arturo's words were tinged with reproach as he addressed his son. "We couldn't bear the thought of staying in that place after you abandoned us." Daniel looked down, a profound sadness weighing on his heart. "I hope one day you can forgive me for all the harm I've caused," he murmured, his voice heavy with regret. Raquel, on the other hand, was enchanted by the mansion, her eyes wide with admiration. "Thank God we finally found them. We were so worried, right, Daniel?" she said, trying to sound sincere, though Daniel was surprised by her sudden change in tone. "Oh no, Daniel, don't blame yourself," Raquel continued, turning to her in-laws with a flattering smile. "Father-in-law, I always told Daniel that you didn't deserve to be treated this way. But you know how it is. He never listens." Her tone was excessively sweet, hoping to win favor, but she noticed that her in-laws were ignoring her. Undeterred, she pressed on, "Father-in-law, this mansion is far too big for just the two of you. I'm sure you wouldn't mind if Daniel and I moved in here to live with you, right? Seriously, we could all be one big happy family," she said, her voice dripping with false humility. "Actually," Arturo interjected, his voice firm, "we forgive you, son. We know you have a good heart deep down, but you lack the strength of character to avoid being manipulated by anyone." His gaze shifted to Raquel, full of disdain. Raquel's first impulse was to insult Don Arturo, but after a moment of reflection, she decided to hold her tongue. "You should be more careful, Raquel, if you want to live in this beautiful mansion," she thought to herself, pretending not to notice the veiled insults directed at her. Arturo continued, "Your mother and I have decided to give you some money to help you get the farm back in shape, but only on the condition that you commit to working the land and living off your own effort." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, Dad, I've treated you so poorly, yet you're still willing to help me. I deeply regret my actions and promise to do everything I can to restore what was lost. I'm truly grateful for your incredible generosity," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "Some money?" Raquel interjected, her confusion evident. "But what does that mean? You're not going to let us live here with you?" she asked, her eyes darting between Dona Clara and Don Arturo. "As for you, Raquel," Dona Clara said, her voice cold, "leave our house this very moment." She pointed toward the door, her expression stern. Raquel, still murmuring under her breath, "Such generosity from these old fools," turned to Daniel, her anger rising. "Are you going to let your parents talk to me like this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with indignation. "It's the least you deserve, Raquel," Daniel muttered quietly, as he always did. "What did you say?" she snapped, her tone threatening. She had heard him clearly, but knew he wouldn't have the courage to repeat it. "Enough, Raquel. I'm tired of this," Daniel said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "From now on, things are going to change. You will respect me, be considerate, and help me work on the farm. And if you don't like it, you know what you can do, he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. But, Daniel. Raquel stammered, shocked. She had never expected such a reaction from Daniel, who had always been submissive and agreed to all her demands. And we're going to stop bothering my parents. We've already caused them enough pain, he said, taking her hand and leading her out of the mansion. A few days later, tired of Raquel's domineering and abusive behavior, Daniel filed for divorce and began living on the farm alone. He poured his heart and soul into the work, and soon the farm began to thrive. The orchards were filled with fruit, the gardens lush with vegetables, and the animals robust and healthy. His parents, who had always loved him unconditionally, visited him frequently, and the atmosphere on the farm was filled with joy and laughter. They had finally become a happy family who enjoyed being together. And so, our story comes to an end. But before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this intriguing tale. What's your opinion on the abusive relationship between Daniel and Raquel? What do you think about Daniel's decision to abandon his elderly parents? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming stories.